Now we'll take a brief look at Ford's foreign policy. Ford wanted to assist South Vietnam and requested aid, but Congress denied it. And so the end result, of course, is that Vietnam ends up being overrun, or South Vietnam rather ends up being overrun, and in 1975, the capital of Saigon, or the capital rather of South Vietnam, Saigon, falls to the North Vietnamese communists. And at that point in time, the whole country really goes to communism. So, Ford was unable to protect South Vietnam as he had hoped. Ford continued détente and entered into the Helsinki Accords with the Soviet Union. We also had an incident that took place off the coast of Cambodia, known as the Mayegas incident. And what happened here is that after the fall of Saigon, the Khmer Rouge gained control of Cambodia. And that basically, the Khmer Rouge were headed by their leader Pol Pot. And Khmer was really a people group, and Rouge meaning red. Red we associate with communism. So this was a communist government that had gained control in Cambodia. And they seized an American ship, the Mayegas. Ford approved a rescue effort, and in the end, several Americans and Khmer Rouge were killed, but the rescue was viewed as a success. Ford also survived a few assassination attempts, particularly two noted assassination attempts pretty close together, both in Northern California. Both of these occurred in September of 1975, the first in Sacramento, when former Manson follower Lynette Squeaky Fromm attempted to shoot at him, and then the second took place in San Francisco just 17 days later when Sarah Jane Moore fired a pistol at him, but that bullet was deflected. So, ultimately Ford doesn't end up being hit, but here he's had actually two assassination attempts, both being executed by women, both in Northern California, only 17 days apart. Then we head into the 1976 election. And this pitted Gerald Ford as the Republican nominee running against former Georgia Governor Jimmy Carter. Carter defeated Ford, taking 50.1% of the popular vote. As far as Carter's appeal, Carter was deeply religious and was seen as being a highly moral person. Now, keep in mind that many Americans kind of lost trust in Ford when he pardoned Nixon. People felt that they couldn't trust Nixon. There had been evidence that had come forth indicating that while he was trying to get us out of Vietnam, that we had been running a secret campaign and bombing in Cambodia and Laos, and there were other information had come forth that really kind of indicated that we had probably more involvement in Vietnam even during the Kennedy administration. The public had been led to believe. So there's just kind of this general sense in which many Americans are growing further and further distrustful of government. So the fact that Carter is seen as being a deeply religious man with very high morals is seen as being a very positive thing. This does appeal to many Americans. And that made them feel a little bit more trustful of Carter. Now, like Ford and Nixon before him, Carter has to deal with the economy. He faced the same economic problems as Ford. To fix the economy, he focused on the energy crisis, but he was unsuccessful. He asked Congress to create a Department of Energy, which it did, and he asked Americans to try to conserve energy, but they mostly ignored his plea. Carter also went on to address the nation in a speech where he talked about a crisis in confidence. But perhaps really the greatest crisis in confidence was the fact that the American people lost confidence in Carter's ability to govern, largely due to his inability to deal with the economy. He was seen as weak and, once again, was really not able to work with Congress to try to fix the economy. Another problem for Jimmy Carter that was kind of an embarrassment was his younger brother Billy. Billy was known for his outlandish behavior, and he also endorsed a brand new brand of beer known as Billy Beer because Billy Carter was a well-known beer drinker. In fact, quite frankly, was known as more or less being an alcoholic. And so, all of a sudden, here's the president's brother, who's kind of the black sheep of the family, and this really kind of becomes an embarrassment for Jimmy Carter. But what can he do? Billy Carter was just kind of seen as a beer-drinking Southern good old boy. As far as foreign policy, human rights had always been important to Carter, and they were really at the forefront of his foreign policy. Carter got the Senate to ratify 2 treaties with Panama that transferred control of the Panama Canal, which had been built by the United States, to Panama before the year 2000. And ultimately, we would literally transfer control of the canal to Panama on December 31st, 1999. But another tough spot for Carter came in terms of dealing with the Soviet Union. Carter singled out the Soviet Union as abusers of human rights because of their treatment of dissidents, or those that spoke out and criticized the government. When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, Carter placed an embargo on grain shipped to the Soviet Union, and he boycotted the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. In return, the Eastern Bloc countries boycotted the 1984 Summer Games in Los Angeles. Now, the end result of all of this, the Soviets don't withdraw from Afghanistan, and the embargo actually hurts American farmers as grain prices fall dramatically. The embargo, it hurts athletes. Our American athletes, many of whom have trained 1980s their year, they win a spot on the Olympic team. We boycott. He doesn't. They don't get to go. These athletes that here's their window. They've won a spot on the Olympic team, and now Carter has taken that away from them. And then, like I said, that also kind of tarnished the 1984 games when the Eastern Bloc countries boycotted our Olympics, and as a result, we did very well in the 1984 Olympics, winning more medals than normal, but it kind of had an asterisk next to it because it wasn't a full participation Olympics. So ultimately, although Carter's intention of punishing the Soviet Union for invading Afghanistan was all well and just, the actions that he took to do so ultimately end up hurting people and hurting Americans and ultimately not improving the situation. But Carter did have one shining foreign policy moment that needs to be taken into account. The highlight of his presidency were the Camp David Accords. And this really is a historic meeting. Camp David is a presidential retreat. This is a place that presidents have gone for many years. He schedules a retreat there, but it's more than just a retreat. It's going to be a meeting between the Egyptian president Anwar el-Sadat and the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. And he gets these two guys there and ultimately really tells them they're not leaving until they reach a peace agreement. And ultimately, Carter really kind of helps broker this peace agreement that really becomes historic. There had been a long history of Egypt and Israel being at war at each other for decades, really since the nation of Israel came into existence back in 1948. They had this long period, 20 plus years of war or tensions, and here they have this historic peace treaty that comes out, signed in 1979, and ultimately, as a result, both Begin and Sadat share the Nobel Peace Prize for 1978. But the treaty, however, was not well received by most Arab nations, and it also helped lead to Sadat being assassinated by Islamic fundamentalists in his own country in 1981.